When my son publicly humiliated me, calling me stupid and sickly after I sacrificed everything for his diploma, he didn't know his cruelty was being streamed live. His shocking act earned him a viral verdict, but it forced me to make the final, painful choice: my dignity or his future. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. My own son called me stupid, uneducated, and sickly on his university graduation day. His cruel words, captured for the world to see, were just the beginning of his downfall. I had paid for his privilege with the health I no longer had. I was 62 years old, but my body already kept a different count. Each morning, my joints protested with a chorus of creaks and groans. My ankles, perpetually swollen like overripe fruit, throbbed with a dull, insistent ache from decades spent on my feet. This was the price I'd always told myself. This pain was the down payment on a dream far grander than any I'd ever dared to have for myself. That dream was Tristan Shaw, my son, walking across the Metropolis University stage, a business degree in his hand, a bright future spread out before him. For 23 years, since his father's swift death, I had poured every ounce of my being into that boy. 2 jobs, sometimes 3, were my constant companions. Days spent scrubbing floors until my back screamed in protest. Evenings serving lukewarm dinners until my feet felt like blocks of lead. My own health was a forgotten footnote, a bill I'd always intended to pay later. Now my persistent cough, once a minor irritation, clung to me like a stubborn shadow. But today, that debt was supposed to fade. Today was the culmination, the reward. I found a folding chair near the back of the sun-drenched university lawn. I leaned heavily on the old wooden cane that had become my reluctant third leg. My worn purse held a cheap, disposable camera, its flash uncertain, and a small, crumpled envelope. Inside that envelope was the last $20 I had to my name until my next cleaning job paid out. A little something for Tristan to celebrate. When his name was called, and he strode across the stage, so tall and handsome, a confident smile on his face, the tears finally spilled over, hot and joyful. My boy. He done it. We done it. After the ceremony, I limped toward him. I spotted him surrounded by his friends, all bright young things from families who probably owned summer homes. "Tristan? Honey," I called out, my voice breathless from the effort and the emotion. "Let your old mom get a picture." He turned. His confident smile faltered slightly as his gaze flicked over my simple, well-worn dress, my sensible shoes, and my cane. His friends looked on with a polite curiosity that felt, to my suddenly sensitive heart, a little like judgment. "Oh, hey, Mom," he said, his tone too casual, too cool. "Yeah, sure, one picture." I fumbled with the cheap camera, my hands shaking with a mixture of pride and a sudden, inexplicable nervousness. Maybe one with your arm around me, Tristan?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. His face, just moments before alight with triumph, twisted into something ugly, something I'd never seen from him. It was a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. "Oh, for God's sake, Mom," he snapped, loud enough for his friends and several nearby families to turn and stare. He snatched the leather-bound diploma folder from my outstretched hand with a rough, impatient tug. Then, with a sneer that cut me to the core, he contemptuously threw the certificate folder directly at my face. The stiff edge of the leather grazed my cheek, a stinging little insult. The folder clattered to the grass at my feet. "Here, you take it, Mom." He spat, his voice dripping with a disdain that was far more wounding than any physical blow. "This degree is probably the most education our family's ever seen. Too bad your stupid and uneducated, sickly self could never understand what it really means." The world stopped. The cheerful chatter faded to a dull roar. His vile words echoed in the sudden, horrified silence. My son, my Tristan, saying these things to me who had coughed her lungs raw over steaming laundry tubs to pay his tuition. My lifetime of sacrifice had been reduced to this public humiliation. The taste in my mouth was bitter, like ashes. He had already turned his back, his shoulders stiff with a self-righteous anger. He rejoined his friends, and a moment later, his laughter sounded forced and brittle, even from a distance. One of his friends was looking down at her phone, fingers flying across the screen. I saw the telltale red light of a recording on at least 2 devices pointed vaguely in my direction before they were hastily lowered. The shame was no longer private. It was live. I stood there, frozen, my cheap camera slipping from my numb fingers. I retrieved my cane, which had clattered to the ground beside the camera. I didn't bother picking up the diploma. Let it lie there. It was his shame, not mine. I began the long, agonizing limp toward the bus stop. The cheerful sounds of the celebration were a mocking counterpoint to the desolation within me. The bus ride home was a blur of unshed tears. The dam finally broke when I stumbled through the door of my small apartment. I wept for the boy he had been, for the cruel man he had become, for the heart he had just casually trampled. Later that evening, the storm of grief had subsided into a dull, throbbing ache. A gentle knock came on my door. It was my old neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez. Her kind face was etched with concern. "Audrey, dear," she said softly, holding out her well-used tablet. "I think you need to see this. My granddaughter just sent it to me. It's all over the internet." My heart seized. With trembling fingers, I took the tablet. There was a shaky, slightly out-of-focus video, but the audio was horrifyingly clear. Tristan's sneering face, the contemptuous throw, his voice spitting out those vile words, "Your stupid and uneducated sickly self." The video was barely 30 seconds. It was titled things like, "Ungrateful Grad trashes his mom." Underneath, the comment section was a torrent of outrage, a digital firestorm. That poor woman, her face, my heart breaks for her. What a disgusting excuse for a son. My deepest, most personal shame was now being witnessed by millions. I wanted his love, not the world's pity. But as I scrolled through the righteous anger directed at Tristan, something else began to stir within me. It was a cold, hard clarity. The world saw what I had perhaps refused to see for too long, blinded by a mother's foolish love. The world saw Tristan not as my precious boy, but as a cruel, ungrateful young man. His actions were the direct consequence of his own appalling behavior. The video, as painful as it was undeniable proof. Proof of his cruelty. Proof of my pain. I handed the tablet back to Mrs. Ramirez. My dream, the one I had worked my fingers to the bone for, had been stomped into the dust and broadcast for the world to dissect. I had been met with scorn and cruelty. Now the world saw his truth, and I had to decide what to do with mine. The image of the cheap camera on the grass felt heavier than the cane in my hand. The news hit me the next afternoon, just as I was trying to make my persistent cough settle. Mrs. Ramirez knocked again, her tablet in hand, her expression a mixture of grim satisfaction and sympathy for me. "Audrey, you need to see this," she said, tapping the screen. "The university. They've made a statement." My heart hammered. Metropolis University's press release was full of academic jargon, but the message was clear. Following a review of the widely circulated online content, the institution had made the decision to revoke the Regent's Leadership Scholarship, awarded to Mr. Tristan Shaw for his final year of study. Any associated postgraduate funding was gone. His scholarship, the one he'd been so proud of, the one meant to open doors for his future, gone. The university, facing a public relations nightmare thanks to the viral video of Tristan's cruelty, had acted swiftly. They were stripping him of his honors, distancing themselves. There was no triumph, only a deep, aching sorrow. This was the boy I had sacrificed my health for, the boy whose future was now unraveling thread by painful thread, all due to his own arrogance and cruelty. The university was even liaising with student support services for affected parties. That was me, the stupid, uneducated, sickly mother who had caused this institutional earthquake. This consequence was far greater than anything I could have inflicted directly. The viral shame was no longer fleeting internet noise. It was having tangible, devastating consequences. As I sat in my worn armchair, the silence of the apartment felt profound. Tristan still hadn't called. Perhaps the shock of the university's decision was too great. My cough, that constant companion, seemed a little looser that night. It was something akin to a grim validation. "That boy needs a lesson," Mr. Davies had muttered. The lessons were now coming thick and fast. I knew his desperate, angry call was not a matter of if, but when. I had to be ready. I thought about the key. Tristan still had one. He'd come and go as he pleased, usually when he needed something, food, a loan, or just a place to crash. That had to stop. The public outcry had unexpectedly brought a few kind offers of help. Mr. Davies from 3B, a retired handyman, had knocked that morning, his face grim. "Mrs. Shaw," he'd simply said, "if you need anything at all, you just let me know. That boy needs a lesson." His words and the quiet support in his eyes gave me the courage I needed. I found Mr. Davies working on his own porch. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice low but firm, "my locks. I need them changed today." He didn't ask why. He just nodded. "I have a new set in my toolkit. Good, sturdy ones. Be happy to, Mrs. Shaw." The rhythmic sound of his screwdriver became a small, reassuring counterpoint to the turmoil in my heart. While he worked, I packed a small box with Tristan's remaining belongings. A few old t-shirts, some forgotten textbooks, cheap trinkets. Not much really for a boy I'd given a lifetime to. The emptiness of the box was a sharp physical cost. When Mr. Davies was finished, he handed me a new set of keys. They felt heavy, solid in my palm. "There you go, Mrs. Shaw," he said. "No one's getting in here now, unless you want them to." I offered him money, but he just waved it away. Consider it a neighborly service for peace of mind. My home was physically secured, but the hardest step was still to come, severing the financial ties. My small disability check, the little I had managed to save from my cleaning jobs, it all went into an account he still had access to, an account he regularly dipped into. That, too, had to end. I would go to the bank first thing in the morning. Tristan hadn't called yet. He was either too ashamed, too angry, or too busy trying to salvage his online reputation. But he would call eventually when he needed something. And when he did, I had to be ready. I sat in my worn armchair, the new keys feeling like a painful extension of my will. My truth didn't need theatrics. My love had been met with cruelty. My body was a testament to years of overwork for his benefit, and he had called me stupid and sickly for it. Now, Audrey Shaw, this stupid, uneducated, sickly mother, was finally, belatedly, going to choose herself. The financial support would end. The open door to my home and my heart would close. He had his degree, the one he'd thrown in my face. Now it was time for him to learn what it truly meant to stand on his own. The thought was terrifying, but in a strange, painful way, liberating. I stood there, holding his old key, knowing I had just declared war. The morning after I'd changed the locks, a fragile dawn broke. painting my small living room in shades of gray. The absence of Tristan's potential presence, his key no longer a threat, was a small, hard-won peace. My first act was to visit the local branch of my bank. My hands trembled as I explained to the kind-faced teller that I needed to remove my son, Tristan Shaw, from having any access to my account. "I need to manage my own finances more directly," I said, citing personal reasons. The truth was, his casual dipping into my meager savings was a betrayal that continued the one he had started on the lawn. There were forms to sign. I answered the questions with a quiet dignity that belied the storm still raging within me. It was a brief, bureaucratic moment, but every penstroke was a physical choice. I sign. The fee hits my card. By the time I left, that particular financial lifeline for Tristan was severed. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. A clear line had been drawn, visible in the new bank passbook tucked into my purse. The rest of that day was a blur of anxious waiting. I expected his call, his fury, his demands. But the phone remained silent. He was likely too preoccupied with the online inferno his actions had ignited to realize his mother had taken decisive steps. I tried to keep busy. I pulled out the box I had packed with his old belongings: an old team jacket, a couple of faded Metropolis University textbooks, a chipped coffee mug. I put the box near the door. It was a tangible object, a hard truth I had placed between us. I remembered the envelope in my purse, the one that had held the last $20. It was still there, but the cash was gone, given to him moments before the world stopped. The crumpled paper felt like a relic, a silent reminder of the sacrifice he'd thrown back at me. As I sat down, my knees screamed a protest. The old familiar ache was the price for scrubbing floors so he could have new textbooks. This physical pain was the true receipt for his degree. The financial freeze was not cruelty. It was simply stopping the blood loss. The phone buzzed, a sound like a physical jab. It wasn't a call. It was a text. "Tristan. Mom, you gotta help me out. Landlord needs the rent money by the 10th. I was counting on my allowance. My card is blocked." My heart, which had dared to soften in the quiet of the afternoon, hardened again. There was no apology for the graduation day, only an immediate demand. I was counting on my allowance. The sheer entitlement of the phrase was a raw, fresh insult. I typed 3 words. I held my breath, my finger hovering over the send button. This was the start of the hardest stand of my life. I hit send. "Me. The allowance has ended." The reply was instantaneous, a torrent of angry, entitled text. "What the hell, Mom? You can't do this. I'll be on the street." "You owe me." I set the phone on the worn armchair and stood up, letting the text sit there like a ticking bomb. I would not answer again until he called. This was the new boundary. No text diplomacy, only direct confrontation for his needs. The apartment was still quiet, the new locks a solid, reassuring barrier. The box of Tristan's things near the door was a cold symbol of my resolve. I sat back down, picking up the small, crumpled $20 envelope. I looked at the little bit of dirt from the grass where the diploma had fallen, where he had called me sickly. A cold, hard knot settled in my chest. I was his mother, not his ATM. The phone vibrated once more, a single, insistent beat against the worn fabric of the chair. The call finally came late that evening, nearly a week after the university's damning press release. A cold rain lashed against my small apartment window, mirroring the bleakness in my heart. I'd just taken my medication for the persistent ache in my knees. "Mom." His voice was small, hesitant, almost boyish. For a treacherous moment, my heart lurched. The old maternal instinct flared up, wanting to soothe, to comfort. I had to physically grip the armrest of my chair to steady myself. Tristan, I said, my voice carefully neutral, devoid of the storm of anger, pity, and profound weariness turning within me. Mom, I messed up, he began, his voice thick with what sounded like unshed tears. I saw the video. Everyone saw it. The university, they took back the scholarship. I don't know what to do. He was so sorry, he claimed, for what he said, for everything. He was stressed. He wasn't thinking. A tiny, fragile seed of hope tried to sprout in the barren landscape of my heart. Was this genuine remorse? It was more than just not thinking, Tristan, I said softly, paying the emotional cost of being honest. It was cruel. It was a betrayal of everything I've ever done for you. I know, he cried, his voice cracking, and I hate myself for it. I was an idiot, a monster. Please, Mom, you have to believe me. I didn't mean it. I was just trying to act big in front of my friends, trying to be someone I'm not. He paused. Then the familiar cadence crept back into his voice, the one I knew so well. The apology was merely a prelude to the request. Look, I'm in a real bind here, he continued, the self-pity replacing the remorse. Without the scholarship money and with you cutting off my allowance, I can't even pay my rent for next month. My landlord's already breathing down my neck. Can't I come home, Mom? Just for a little while, until I get back on my feet. I can make it up to you, I swear. Home, money. My heart, which had dared to soften, hardened again. The new locks on my door were a physical manifestation of this boundary. Tristan, I said, my voice firmer now. Your actions have consequences. Serious ones. Coming home right now? That's not the answer. You need to understand the gravity of what you've done, what you've become. But where am I supposed to go? He wailed, the self-pity now evident. My friends? They're all being weird since the video. No one wants to be seen with me. You're my mother. You can't just throw me out on the street. I didn't throw you out, Tristan. I corrected him, my voice like ice. You threw me away publicly on the day that should have been a celebration of my sacrifices as much as your achievement. You threw away your scholarship, your reputation with your own cruel words and actions. His tone shifted then. The veneer of remorse cracked, revealing the familiar ugly entitlement beneath. So this is it then? He sneered, his voice rising. You're actually going to abandon me after all your talk about family, about sacrifice? Some mother you are. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing me suffer? The argument escalated quickly. He wasn't listening to my calm attempts to explain responsibility. He was raging, a torrent of blame. He accused me of ruining his life, of being a vindictive old woman, of never truly supporting his ambitions. A claim so ludicrous, given my ruined health, that it almost made me laugh. A harsh, bitter sound. How could you do this to me, Mom? He wailed, his voice now a furious roar through the phone. I'm your son. You're supposed to help me, not kick me when I'm down. My voice, when I finally spoke, trembled, not with fear, but with a profound, weary anger. The years of suppressed pain finally erupted. How could I do this, Tristan? I shot back. I worked myself to the bone. My back is shot. My knees scream every time I take a step. This damned cough. I punctuated the word with a racking spasm. Is a constant reminder of the factory dust I breathed for years, so you could have clean air and a fancy education. I gave up everything, Tristan. Everything, so you could stand on that stage. And you repaid me by throwing your success in my face and calling me stupid and sickly for the very sacrifices that got you there. You dare to ask me how I could do this. His response was a string of curses, vile and shocking, followed by a chilling threat. "You'll regret this, old woman. You need me more than you think. You'll come crawling back, begging me to forgive you." Then the line went dead. I sat there, the receiver still pressed to my ear. His renewed outburst, his utter lack of genuine remorse, his immediate reversion to blame and aggression when he didn't get what he wanted. It was the final, agonizing confirmation. The boy I had loved was truly lost to a monstrous entitlement. He hadn't learned a thing. His apology was just another manipulation. He still saw me not as his mother, but as a resource to be exploited. The new kind of dread at the thought of him returning, of him trying to force his way back into my life, was now intertwined with an unshakable resolve. I had to protect myself. The door to my home was locked, and now the door to my heart, the one that had always been wide open for him, was beginning to close, bolt by painful bolt. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that his last words were not a threat, but a promise. It was 2 days later, a gray, drizzly afternoon, that the pounding began. Not a knock, but a furious, demanding hammering on my newly secured front door. I knew even before I peered through the peephole that it was Tristan. His face was contorted with rage, his eyes bloodshot, his hair disheveled. He looked like a cornered animal. "Mom, open this damn door. I know you're in there, you old witch. You can't do this to me," he roared, his voice muffled, but still carrying that familiar edge of aggression. The sound of his anger was a sharp sensory jolt, but my hands, surprisingly, did not shake. I stood on the other side, my heart thumping, but my resolve held. I will not be his victim again. Then my neighbor, Mr. Davies, who had changed the locks for me, appeared on his own porch. He was a silent, sturdy presence. Tristan saw him, and his shouting faltered for a moment, replaced by a sneer. "What are you looking at, old man?" he spat, before turning his attention back to my door. "Mom, I need to talk to you. You owe me an explanation. You owe me money." I spoke through the closed door, my voice louder and firmer than I thought possible. "Tristan, I owe you nothing more. I told you my financial support has ended. You are not welcome in this home while you behave like this. Please leave before I am forced to call the police." "The police?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You wouldn't dare. You're my mother. You're just being dramatic." He rattled the doorknob violently, then kicked the base of the door with a thud that reverberated through the small apartment. That was the line. Mr. Davies stepped off his porch and walked toward Tristan. "Son," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable authority, "your mother has asked you to leave. I suggest you do so. Now, before this escalates into something you'll truly regret." Tristan whirled on him, perhaps about to unleash another torrent of abuse. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was Mr. Davies's steady gaze, or perhaps the sight of Mrs. Ramirez now appearing on her porch, her arms crossed. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a sullen, resentful glare. He kicked the door one last time, a petulant, childish gesture, then turned and stalked away. His final words, shouted over his shoulder, were the echo of his last call, a promise of retribution. "You'll be sorry for this, Mom. You'll all be sorry." I leaned against the door, my legs trembling, relief washing over me in a dizzying wave. Mr. Davies and Mrs. Ramirez came over, their faces etched with concern. "Are you all right, Audrey?" Mrs. Ramirez asked, her hand on my arm. "I will be," I said, taking a shaky breath. "Thank you, both of you, for being here." That incident, his furious return, his utter lack of remorse, cemented my decision. His need for money had been replaced by a need for dominance. I had to make my boundary a legal wall, not just a wooden door. Later that week, after speaking with a free legal aid service Mrs. Ramirez recommended, I sent Tristan a formal letter via registered mail. The letter reiterated that he was not to contact me in a harassing manner, that he was not welcome at my home under the current circumstances, and that all financial support had ceased. I also, with a heavy heart, updated my will. The little I had would go to a distant niece, who had always shown me kindness. There would be nothing left for the son who had thrown my sacrifices back in my face. This action was the final severance. The price of dignity was cutting the thread completely. The weeks turned into months. Tristan didn't try to break down my door again. I heard through the grapevine of community gossip that he was struggling, bouncing between friends' sofas, his reputation in tatters, his job prospects non-existent after the viral video, and the loss of his scholarship. Each piece of news was a fresh pang in my mother's heart, but my resolve did not waver. This was his path to walk, his reckoning. The world saw him as ungrateful. I saw him as a toxic threat to my health and peace. I looked at the simple typed words of the legal letter on my table. He was not to contact me in a harassing manner. That was the last piece of leverage I had. The quiet certainty in the house was only broken by the heavy thud of the mail slot, an answer I had not expected. The quiet certainty in the house was only broken by the heavy thud of the mail slot. I had not expected an answer to the legal letter. I had expected more silence or more rage. I limped to the door and picked up the envelope. It was a certified letter, plain white, with the return address of the free legal aid service Mrs. Ramirez had recommended. Legal aid. Final filing. The formality of the envelope was a sharp reminder that my conflict was no longer a private family matter. It was a file. The letter was short, summarizing my rights and confirming the cease and desist was filed. It cost me 3 lines of reading, but it solidified the boundary. I was protected, not just by my new locks, but by a paper shield. The only thing missing was the final, irreversible action on my end. I had cut the immediate financial lifeline at the bank. Now I had to sever the future one. I drove out to the office of the will attorney recommended by the legal aid service, a bright, impersonal space. My knees screamed in protest as I pulled myself from the car, the pain a constant physical record of my life of sacrifice. This sickly self paid for everything. I would not let that price be wasted. The lawyer, a sharp, focused woman with kind eyes, slid a document across the desk. "This confirms the changes, Mrs. Shaw," she said. "The entirety of your estate, after final costs, is directed to your distant niece, Clara, or to the designated charity, as requested." The signature of the woman who was called stupid. I picked up the pen. The signature felt heavy, solid. I exhaled like surf. Victory. Hard-earned. This piece of paper guaranteed the son who had thrown away his future would not receive the few things I had left. I signed the document, putting a lifetime of sacrifice in the hands of a stranger. Cut to verb. I slid the final copy of the will into a strongbox that afternoon. The act itself was finality, a cold, clean boundary drawn around my future. The physical act of protecting myself was draining, but the pressure was easing. Tristan was quiet. His shame, the public video, was doing the work I couldn't do alone. A few weeks later, Mrs. Ramirez caught me at the mailboxes. She was holding a grocery bag and looking grim. "That boy, Tristan," she whispered, leaning closer. "My niece saw him downtown. He was trying to get a job at the new distribution center. They turned him away. They said the video, the one with you, it showed poor character, a risk to their company's values. They didn't want the headache." I felt the pang, but not the grief I expected. Instead, I felt a terrible, icy confirmation. His words had been a financial weapon against himself. His arrogance was the poison. He's sleeping on his friend's sofa, now. Mrs. Ramirez continued, her voice heavy with pity. They're tired of him. He keeps trying to blame you for the scholarship loss. Tristan blames me. My jaw locked. He wasn't taking responsibility. He was only seeking a new target for his rage. I made my stand, Mrs. Ramirez, I said, my voice steady, though my heart ached. He needs to stand now, too. The consequence was widening. Private, social, financial, public. His job prospects were gone. His friends were tiring of his self-pity. The consequences were multiplying, an engine of reckoning that I had only enabled, not engineered. My stupid, sickly self was finally learning to draw a line. I started taking my medication every morning, a small, selfish act of preservation. The ritual of swallowing the pills felt like a small act of defiance. I will live for myself now. I took my cane and went for a slow, short walk around the complex. The air was cool, clean. I stopped at a little flower bed Mr. Davies had planted by the communal seating area. The sight of the soil, rich and dark, was a vivid image of slow growth. The physical act of placing my cane down felt like planting a flag. I was building a new life on the wreckage of the old one. The anger was gone, replaced by a steel-like resolution. My cough still rattled my chest with every deep breath. The price of his education remained visible on my body, but my spirit no longer felt weighted down by his toxic entitlement. The fight had cost me my son, but it was giving me back myself. I signed the document, putting a lifetime of sacrifice in the hands of a stranger. The world had gone quiet. The initial public furor over the viral video had faded, replaced by the usual churn of internet outrage. 6 months later, the silence was heavy, a profound and unnerving absence where Tristan's aggressive need used to be. I focused on my health, the thing I had neglected for 23 years. I went for short, slow walks with Mr. Davies. The knee still ached, and the cough was still there, but the weight on my spirit had lessened. This small progress was the only payoff I allowed myself. The phone rang one evening. It was a cold, late hour. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some weary intuition, a small physical flutter in my chest, made me answer. Mom. It was Tristan. His voice was different this time, quieter, stripped of its usual arrogance, almost hesitant. My heart did not lurch this time. I slid my hand across the table until my fingers brushed the solid wood. I made a volitional choice. Tristan, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I would not let his quiet voice undo 6 months later of hard work. He didn't ask for money. He didn't rage. He just talked. He told me about a menial job he'd finally found, about the tiny room he was renting, about how hard it was. He spoke of the shame of using the bus, the difficulty of holding down a schedule. My hands are raw, Mom. I was used to more, he said. The word more hung in the air, a ghost of his old entitlement. He didn't apologize, not in so many words, but there was a weariness in his voice, a hint of something broken that hadn't been there before. The price of entitlement. I listened, mostly in silence. He was used to the easy life I had worked myself sickly to provide. Now he was paying his own price. When he finally fell quiet, I knew I had to speak my final truth. I took a deep breath, and the persistent cough gave me a sharp, visceral anchor. The world has seen the man you chose to be on your graduation day, Tristan, I said, my voice steady. Your anger when I cut you off only proved you hadn't understood the depth of your own cruelty, or the pain you inflicted after a lifetime of my sacrifice. I paused, letting the weight of the last sentence sink in. The silence on the line was thick. I will always be your mother, and that bond, however scarred, will never fully break, I conceded, paying a small emotional cost. But I will no longer be your enabler, nor will I be your victim. I had to use the leitmotif now to change its meaning. This door and my financial support remain closed until you find genuine, lasting remorse. Until you build a life based on respect for yourself and for others. That journey, son, is yours alone to make. I did not use his cruel words, but the echo was there. My sickly self is making a choice for my own health now. He didn't argue. He just said, "Okay, Mom." His voice was barely a whisper. Then he hung up. I placed the receiver in its cradle. I didn't know if he would ever truly change. But as I hung up the phone, I felt a profound, if somber, peace settle over me. I had spoken my final truth. I had set my boundaries. I had chosen my own dignity. The quiet support of the community, a shared cup of tea with Mrs. Ramirez, a knowing, supportive smile from Mr. Davies, had been my true inheritance. My self-care was no longer a footnote. It was the entire story. The path ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a quiet, resilient hope for my own future. The weight on my spirit had lessened, but I knew the fight was not truly over. The phone call from Tristan, quiet and broken, was the third reversal in our story. It had shifted the goal, not from winning a fight, but from securing a peace. Yet the old scar remained tender. The world had gone quiet, but sometimes a small ripple reminded me that the consequences of that viral moment were still playing out. The small acts of self-care continued. I kept my scheduled walks with Mr. Davies. The physical cost of my self-neglect was still high. My cough was still there. But I was investing in my health, not his ambition. One afternoon, I came home to find a card tucked into my mailbox. It wasn't a bill or a legal document. It was a simple thank you note from Clara, the distant niece who was now my sole heir. She thanked me for the small gift I had sent her for her recent birthday. A simple, kind gesture, a reward for the finality I had chosen. The card was a silent message about the inheritance I'd secured. Contrast, a stranger's thanks versus a son's betrayal. The next week, the unexpected happened. A young woman, unfamiliar but polished, knocked on my door. I peered through the peephole. She was one of Tristan's friends from the graduation day, the one whose jaw had dropped. I slid the deadbolt. Click, clack. The locks held, giving me control. I opened the door just a crack. "Mrs. Shaw? Audrey?" she asked, her voice tight. "My name is Claire. I was there that day. I just need to talk to you for 5 minutes. It's about Tristan." My pulse spiked. This was Tristan trying to use an old connection, a new pressure point. The family antagonist leverages an enabler. "I have nothing to say to Tristan, Claire," I stated, keeping my voice steady. "My position has not changed." "No, wait. He didn't send me," she rushed to explain, tears welling in her eyes. "I needed to tell you the truth. He's been telling everyone he's a victim of elder abuse, that you're vindictive because he cut you off first." The lie was ugly, a final desperate inversion of the truth. It was his new leverage. "He's using the viral video now," she confessed, her shame visible. "He claims he was having a breakdown and you filmed it. He says you've always been cruel. We saw it, Audrey. We saw the diploma hit your face. He's lying, and I can't stand it anymore. My conscience won't let me." A risky ask, a confession. I opened the door slightly more, inviting her vulnerability. "What did he want from you?" I asked. "He wanted me to call the university, to tell them the video was edited, that you were threatening to cut him off if he didn't thank you publicly," she admitted. "He wanted me to lie, I refused. I can't be part of that. The betrayal was total. Not only was he lying, but he was trying to drag others into his vortex of entitlement. Thank you, Claire, I said, my voice heavy with the grim validation. You need to cut the thread, completely, for your own health. I closed the door gently. Click, clack. The security of the lock gave me control over the truth that now echoed in the silence. I called the legal aid service immediately. This new lie, this claim of elder abuse, was a fresh, dangerous escalation, pushing the stakes from financial legal to public safety. The consequence? A new restraining order to legally enforce the boundary already physically built. The lawyer, who knew the full context, handled it swiftly. A new document was filed, petition for protective order. The new reality was stark. One lie, one more document, one more layer of protection. I sat down and looked out the window. My knees ached. My cough was present, a reminder of the price paid. But the old weakness was gone. I had spent 62 years old protecting him. Now I was protecting me. The final legal loop was closing. Tristan was entirely on his own. He was still trying to manipulate the system, but now I had a legal wall between us. I had made my final move. The only thing left was the resolution I had chosen, a bittersweet victory. My breath hitched. The final clean break was now only a matter of time and a judge's signature. My breath hitched. The final clean break was now only a matter of time and a judge's signature. I had faced the shame, paid the price, and secured the final protection. The legal aid office called the next afternoon. The protective order was granted. The wall was complete. The end of the story was quiet, not a roar. It was not a grand courtroom scene. It was a single, small action that brought me full circle. My joints ached, but I forced myself out for a walk. As I walked past the university library, I stopped. The green lawn where Tristan had humiliated me was busy with students studying for finals. It was exactly 6 months later from the day everything shattered. I remembered the diploma folder clattering at my feet, the bright flash of the disposable camera, the contempt in his face, calling me stupid. I sat on a low stone wall, leaning on my cane. A few students glanced at my sickly appearance, but no one saw the viral victim anymore. I was just a woman securing her future. Then I saw him. Tristan was sitting alone on a bench near the perimeter of the lawn. He looked thinner, his shoulders slumped. He wasn't in a dark graduation gown. He wore a thin, dirty jacket. He wasn't laughing with friends. He was nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. He looked up. His eyes met mine. The protective order meant he couldn't approach me. The consequence of his final lie was a legal distance he could not cross. He made a small involuntary movement, a pathetic half-start that was immediately blocked by the reality of the order. He stood up, shoving his hands deep into his pockets. I could see the shame now, not the performative remorse from his call, but a dull, deep consequence that had been carved out by 6 months later of reality. He did not apologize. He did not yell. He simply turned and walked away. The moment was silent, but it was the final confrontation. He was walking away from the life I had paid for, and he was doing it alone. I watched until he was out of sight. My eyes dropped to my own hands. They were resting on the head of my cane. The simple cane that had become my reluctant third leg was now a symbol of my freedom. It was my tool, my support, and my quiet sign of dignity. I finally understood the emotional arithmetic. The price was permanent separation. The victory was my life. Tristan had thrown his own future away. I had secured mine. My knees still ached, and the cough was still a constant companion. The map of my life was still etched deep within the marrow of my bones, but the dream had shifted. It was no longer the down payment on his future. It was the full payment on mine. I took a deep breath, and for the first time since that day, the air felt clean. My knees still ached, but for the first time in 62 years old, the price I paid was for myself. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you are here.